Hi, my name is Jarrett Wynne, and for this project, I chose the Gary V Audio Experience podcast. It was recommended by Charlie Parham, and the reason that I chose this podcast was because I knew a lot about Gary V, and I've listened to his podcast before, and I just really love business and entrepreneurship podcasts and what they teach. So Gary V, his real name is Gary Vaynerchuk. He is the CEO of VaynerMedia, which is a marketing and branding company. But before that, his first big break in business was he took his parents' wine company and he took it online back when e-commerce was just starting to become a thing, and he grew his parents' company exponentially. And then later on, he went on to create VaynerMedia, marketing and branding company. And he also owns several other companies as well as investing heavily in things like Twitter and Facebook. So in his podcast, he talks about, the power of social media and social media marketing. He says that, the phone that we hold in our hands is, more powerful than the computers that people had, 50, 60 years ago. So the unlimited potential in social media is something he speaks on a lot. Posting something on Facebook is completely free, and that's, a form of marketing. The amount of potential that we have just from our phones and from social media is astounding when you look at it compared to, years ago. It's something that if you're trying to build a business that you should really take advantage of. And, he says that it's all about, branding, not the quick sale. One example he gives is, you don't go buy a pair of Nikes because you saw them on a billboard or you saw them in an ad. You buy a pair of Nikes because of the brand that they've built over the years. And if you want to really be successful in business, that's what you have to do, is you have to build a brand. He always says that it's you got to play the long game. You can't, throw a Hail Mary and expect to become a successful business overnight. Things take time. Like Facebook didn't blow up overnight. It took time and it took hard work. Hard work, he says, is the number one variable that you can control. When it comes to all the things that it takes to become successful in business, the number one most controllable thing is how hard you work. There's so many other things outside of your control that you can't dwell on, and you can't have any say over, but hard work is the number one thing that you can control. And another thing that he goes over a lot in several of his podcasts is one of the most important things of being successful is not caring about what other people think of you or what other people think of your business and your goals, because caring about what other people think of you is never gonna do anything for you. It's only gonna hold you back. One example and one statistic that he gives says that like 70% of people overreach on their first house. They spend way too much money and they buy a house that has extra rooms that they don't need for that point in their life, just so they can look like they're successful, so they can impress their friends and things like that. And when you're out there spending money like that just to gain acceptance from people and put off the image that you're doing super well in life, that's only going to hold you back from growing your business or growing in your profession. And another thing that he speaks on is coming from nothing isn't necessarily a disadvantage to you. It's all about perspective, all about how you look at it. Because Gary V, him and his family, they migrated to the U.S. From the USSR, and they all lived in 8 of them lived in a studio apartment in New York when they first got here. So he came from the bottom, came from dirt. One thing he says is it's hard to stay hungry when you started out fed. It's what that means is the people who just were fed a silver spoon when they were growing up. They've had everything from the beginning. It's hard to stay motivated when everything is handed to you from such a young age. But when you come from the bottom, it just for people who look at it the right way. When you come from the bottom, it just motivates you to work that much harder, do that much better, and gain the things that you've never had before in your life. And that resonates with me a lot. Not coming from a super wealthy family, a lot of times I would think like, man, all these other people, they're way ahead of me just because they grew up in a wealthy household. But that's not necessarily true. Really, it's all up to you at the end of the day. And that's one of the probably the number one thing that I take out of Gary Vee's teachings is that right there. But what I plan to keep listening to the podcast because it is an ongoing thing. It's not over. He posts about every day, so I continue to learn from Gary Vee and take what he does and take what he says and implement it into my own life, into my schooling, and when I graduate into my business career.